Speaking of the Mormon practice of polygamy in Utah, author Richard Abanis wrote in his book, One Nation Under Gods, that, quote, after several years in Utah, Mormon men began realizing that their supply of young women was dwindling, end quote. 2 weeks ago, in part 3 of our coverage of this topic, we discussed how Brigham Young and others view women as property, even as cattle, which were gathered, owned, and exchanged. Well, when the women started to run in short supply here in Utah, something needed to be done to refresh the herd, so to speak. LDS missionaries were therefore instructed to bring back as many females as possible from the mission field to replenish the wanting supply. Concerns began to crop up, however, when these missionaries, who were usually a lot younger, more handsome and appealing than the brethren back here, began to take the, quote, best women for themselves and leave the graying grandpas with the leftovers. Heber C. Kimball told departing missionaries the following, and this is found in Journal of Discourses, Volume 6, page 256. Listen, quote, "You," speaking to the missionaries, "are sent out as shepherds to gather the sheep together, and remember that they are not your sheep. They belong to him that sends you. They do not make a choice of any of those sheep. Do not make selections before they are brought home and put into the fold. The brother missionaries have been in the habit of picking out the prettiest women for themselves before they get here and bringing the ugly ones for us." He said this. "Hereafter, you have to bring them all here before taking any of them, and let us all have a fair shake," end quote. Pretty nice stuff, eh there? That guy became a prophet of the church. Now, I've got to be honest, if I was the leader of the church that taught that men needed to take on extra wives in order to achieve exaltation, and I was talking to these missionaries, I would probably say the same thing, wouldn't you? But you have to ask yourself, what would it be in me that would proclaim such a thing? Does this sound like the love of God, the worship of God, the desire to do right? Or does this sound carnal, like the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, the pride of life? Well, word got around overseas that the women that were going back to Utah, or Zion as they called it, were getting taken in and becoming plural wives. This caused both the LDS leadership and the missionaries to frankly lie to people about the practice of polygamy in order to convince them to join the church and come back to Zion. The same lying still occurs today by the missionaries, who represent a very limited gospel view to investigators, and the leadership still continue to present a very limited historical view. For example, in the 1866 version of the Doctrine and Covenants, it denied polygamy, okay? Until 1876, when the monogamy revelation, which was in the Doctrine and Covenants, was replaced with Joseph Smith's polygamy revelation. But in 1866, when the monogamy was still in the Doctrine and Covenants, Brigham Young declared, quote, "The only men who become gods, even the sons of God, are those who enter into polygamy," end quote. The same year, Brigham Young's successor, John Taylor, said, "Where did the commandment come from in relation to polygamy? It also came from God." He continued, "When I see any of our people, men or women, opposing a principle of this kind, I consider them apostates." What is interesting is that while in France, this very same John Taylor said in a debate that polygamy was not practiced. He quoted the Doctrine and Covenants and as the proof text and said, and he read from the one that talked about monogamy only. Even though back in Utah, this same John Taylor, future president of the Mormon Church, while standing on French soil and denying the doctrine and practice of polygamy, had 12 wives back here, and at that point had bore him 8 children. They lie. He lied in order to get people to convert and come to this isolated land of Zion. Once they were here, they had little choice. As with the leaders, so with the sheep. Mormon missionaries routinely lied, as they do today, in order to deceive the European audiences. These lies were outright, or they were in the form of half-truths or misinformation. 3 nights ago, I was unable to sleep and sat up and looked at the internet and at a movie review. MRQE is the name of it, and it is a movie review query that has hundreds and hundreds of movie reviewers in one location. And as I was looking up a movie that my family and I were going to see, there was a banner ad up at the top. And it prompted people to click the banner ad, and the banner ad read, "Remember when you knew who God was?" And it shows a picture of a child. And so you click on that, and then it says, "Remember again, get a free Bible." So you click on that, and then up comes LDS.org, their website, or Mormon.org, excuse me, and it says, "Click here to have a conversation." So I click there, it's 12 midnight, and a guy named Norman the Mormon. Norman comes on, and Norman is like, "Hi, this is Norman." Now, I tried Shawn McCraney as my real name and my real email 5 times, and I never got anybody to come on. Never. Maybe they have a list or something. So I put in Kevin's name, my partner, and then Norman came on immediately. "Hey, Kevin." So I'm talking to him, and I just didn't let him know who I was or anything or what I do. And I have never heard more manipulation, more dancing, more humanistic, more emotionally driven appeals to knowing God than what Norman was putting out there for me. I suggest you all go to that and go and have discussions with these guys. Clog them with them. Talk to them and see what they have to say. Challenge them with the stuff you've learned. You won't believe what lengths they'll go to. Well, let me share a story about one woman who was deceived into coming to Zion as back in the day. Her name was Caroline Owens, and she had been friends with one John Miles when they were children living in England. Well, John Miles migrated to Utah, became a Mormon, and on a return trip to England, he asked Caroline to be his wife, saying that they would be wed once they came back to Zion. Caroline asked John about polygamy, and Miles reassured her that only a few men were allowed to take more than one wife, but that young men like himself would only have one. The couple came to Utah, and Caroline reported that she was treated with great love and respect, becoming John Miles' new wife. But the entire charade revealed itself just hours after her wedding. She recounted in her own words this: "I can never tell the horrors of the next few hours. I went to my room and dressed for the reception, which took place at Canon's other house where he kept his 3 wives. When I went down, there was a crowd there, among the rest a plain-looking girl in a calico dress, to whom I was introduced. It was Emily Spencer. I told her to get up. I guess Emily must have been sitting on John's lap at this point. Miles came forward and said, 'Sit still, Emily Spencer, my wife.' I felt as though I had been shot. I said, 'Your wife? Then what am I?' He said, 'You are both my wives.' All at once my shame flashed over me. Here I was, dishonored, the polygamous wife of a Mormon. I ran out of the house, bent only on escape. I did not think where. I could not do it, though, for Miles and the young canon, a son of the delegate, ran after me and dragged me back. But I stole away and returned to the other house where I had been living for 3 weeks since my arrival from England. I noticed there was no key in the lock, but shot a little bolt and piled chairs against the door. I cried myself to sleep. The next thing I knew, I don't know what time it was, Miles stood in the room and was locking the door on the inside. I screamed. Miles said I need not take on, for Brother Cannon had anticipated that I would make trouble and had the house cleared of everyone else. I found out that it was so. He told me that I might as well submit. There was no law here to control the saints. There was no power on earth that would save me." End quote. This deception ultimately led to a Supreme Court case of John Miles against the United States of America. Before Englishmen William Jarman and his wife came to Utah, they too had been deceived by the missionaries. According to Jarman, the elder who converted them never denied polygamy, but he continued to say, like the missionaries will say today often, polygamy was very rarely followed. The prophet Brigham and one or two others practice it. The elder continues speaking to Jarman's English wife, saying, "But Mrs. Jarman, it is not essential to salvation, as you seem to think, that men must become polygamous." Remember, 2 years earlier, Brigham Young actually taught that it was, and continued to teach that. What was the fallout if an LDS man or woman refused to practice polygamy? The very same fallout if a man or a woman refuse or speak out against Mormon leaders when they say something. Only back at that time, the pressure was a little stronger. For instance, there is a documented case in which one Bishop Snow of Manti, a polygamist, took action that is unheard of, but was given the thumbs up by Brigham Young. It seems old Bishop Snow, a believer in the principle in the Book of Mormon and modern-day prophets and the possessor of several wives, had his eye on this buxom young LDS girl and approached her with an offer to become one of his. The girl thanked Snow but declined, saying she was in love and engaged to a younger man, one Thomas Lewis, who was much closer to her in age. Bishop Snow, invoking God's name, said it is his will that she become his bride, and that her boyfriend or her beau could be gotten rid of and sent on a mission. But the girl refused. Her refusal was unheard of, just like refusing a bishop today is unheard of if he says, "Thus saith the Lord," or "The Lord has told you this." You don't refuse callings in Mormonism. Well, this brought Thomas Lewis in before a council of men. Bishop Snow was leading it, and when Snow said, "Hey, I want you to leave this girl alone," Lewis said, "No way," and for his insolence, he was attacked by these believers and held down and brutally castrated by Bishop Snow, who used a Bowie knife to do the job. Now, before you pass this off as a singular aberration, there are some things to consider relative to this castration act that Bishop Snow ruthlessly, selfishly, and demonically did upon Thomas Lewis. First, it was done by a man who was supposedly called by God to be a judge in Israel and was angered because he didn't get his way. It was done by a true believing Mormon leader and his counselors and friends. He was held down by believers. This never would be done, ever, by Bible-believing Christians to another human being. This would not happen. Maybe in the history of Christianity things have occurred, but not by people who know and love Jesus Christ. They are still castrating males today who refuse to obey their will. How? By telling them they'll lose their wives in the eternities if they don't submit. By telling them they will lose the ability to procreate for an eternity in the hereafter if they leave the church. By refusing to put independently minded men in places of position, thereby rendering them theologically impotent and a social outcast. From the seed springs the tree, from the tree comes the fruit, from the fruit comes the seed, and on and on and on. Sadly, horribly, disgustingly, the girl ended up marrying Bishop Snow. His counselor recorded in May of 1857 that Thomas Lewis has, quote, now gone crazy. Rumor has it that he wandered the desert crazy until he died. In historian D. Michael Quinn's book, The Extensions of Power, he notes that when Brigham Young was informed of the castration, he stated that he felt, quote, inclined to sustain Bishop Snow. And then in July, Young wrote to Bishop Snow and said, quote, just let the matter drop and say no more about it, and it will soon die away with the people. Just like Mountain Meadows Massacre, right, Brigham?
Hey everybody, if you've enjoyed this video presentation, I want to invite you to come and check us out at cult.love. Can you believe that name? Cult.love. It stands for Christian Ultra-Libertarians for Truth. See, once I saw Mormonism for what it was, I began to embark on testing everything in the faith, in Christian evangelicalism, and came to see the biblically supported reality that brick and mortar church is done. It's really, truly over, and this is supported by the Bible. And so all there is a better way that God has given the earth since the victory of his Son. And that's all found in light and learning and love and liberty. And so we at Cult.love are focused on those things online in an online community. We got rid of brick and mortar. There's no ties and memberships. If you are tired of religion, if you've been abused, burned out, lied to, taken advantage of, check us out at Cult.love.